Success. The accomplishment of an aim or purpose. This is one of the first definitions you will see about this phrase, and it's pretty much what this should be considered as. This can be as simple as 100%ing your favorite game to getting hired to a job you always wished for. But let's change perspectives for a bit. Let's imagine you're the founder of a company that is just starting out. What do you see as success? Brand recognition? Financial stability? Maybe even seeing people be grateful for your offerings. Of course, these are all very good accomplishments to reach and help your company grow. However, you can guess by now that a company's, or should I say corporations, success is most, if not all the time, just money. Make as little effort as humanly possible to maximize the number of sales and profits. This has started to become an issue to an absurd degree as of late. With more and more people getting into video games and by this point being a mainstream hobby, it's becoming a lot more common than ever to see a lot of big names in the industry just not try as much as they used to. So, after so much time, after saving these thoughts in my head, I think it's finally time to say it. Success, the financial kind, is one of the most devastating things that a company can have if not treated properly. And now look, this obviously doesn't apply to every single developer and/or publisher. There are as many smart corporations as there are bad ones. Sega and Altus are still making incredible titles today, and Nintendo does make sure to publish a product of quality. But when I'm mentioning companies like the ones you see here, that's when I think something's wrong. So today, I'll be going over 3 of the most controversial and devastating releases from late 2020 to at the time of recording this production. Let's begin. Let's start a little simple. Nintendo is, and for most of its life in the gaming industry, has always stayed as a brand of quality. They have countless great franchises like Mario, Zelda, Metroid, and so many more. Nintendo has always been very likable and iconic, but at the same time they are also capable of decisions that get major backlashes. Shutting down fan games, their old creators program, being behind in basic utilities for the systems. They always do very questionable things, but at the end of the day, they rarely detract from bringing quality games to their consoles. Although, something changed and caused thousands upon thousands of Nintendo followers to spread the word. It was September 13th of 2018. Nintendo had a direct today announcing many games that were in development and releasing for the Switch. It was in this direct that they also announced a brand new service, Nintendo Switch Online. As a brief summary, this is basically a membership that lets you play online, access to NES and SNES games, and your save data would be safe in the cloud servers. To no one's surprise, people weren't and still aren't happy about this inclusion. But I didn't really care. I would love it if Nintendo improved on things like adding achievements and messaging, maybe even improving the online itself. But for $20, I can live with it. That was until they made this. To remind some of you, around late September of 2021, Nintendo made a new direct. This was when they announced a brand new addition to the online service called the Expansion Pack, showcasing that it would include both N64 and Sega Genesis titles, all along with new Switch controllers that looked like the ones from their respective consoles. This was a pretty well-received announcement initially, though, like many, I saw the Genesis games were an odd inclusion. Like, come on, we had a collection of them in the Switch already. Why not use the Expansion Pack for other Nintendo systems? Nevertheless, seeing a few of the popular titles in the N64 library with more to come was quite a big deal. But as I was saying, only a few weeks later in early October, we got Animal Crossing Direct, detailing a major new update along with a new DLC pack under the name Happy Home Paradise. However, the same direct was also the confirmation on the expansion pack's prices and that the DLC pack can be given if you pay for it. For $50, you get the Switch Online membership and the expansion pack for a full year. And if you want to get the family version so you can give access to 8 Switch accounts within the Switch, that will be $80. First off, this is a bit too much in my opinion. Charging more than double the price for the basic service for what's included is overkill, especially with the family membership. I know, part of the reason is due to licensing. But if licensing third-party titles was going to increase the price by that much, why not just emulate one of your other systems? Were people really more likely to get the expansion if the Genesis games were there than something like Game Boy? Maybe it's because they didn't want to put any effort into considering your main selling point to this service having a horrible launch. For those of you who don't remember or were aware, the N64 games were actually having a lot of issues initially. Most of these applied to input lag, laggy online multiplayer, and a couple not looking as good as the original. I get it. Emulation is something that requires a lot of manpower, and knowing Nintendo, this is far from their priorities. But if you want to make this an extra pillar for your service, at least have the decency to make it function. And this doesn't even mention the other elephant in the room. One of my biggest concerns for this edition was that you get access to Animal Crossing's DLC as long as you are paying for the expansion. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that this is just an attempt to justify the expansion's price. That's a fine idea, however I don't think it should be applied in this scenario, and here's why. I may seem like someone who likes Animal Crossing, but honestly, I've never played any entries. I hear good things about New Horizons and New Leaf, but they just don't seem like my type of game at the moment. I do have a ton of JRPGs to play, you know. Point is, this DLC is completely worthless to me, and it might be for you too if you don't like Animal Crossing. That's the main problem with adding the DLC here, and is why I'm not supporting this. Do I just accept it and pay $50 for 2/3 of the package? This is just pure laziness from Nintendo, and it's kind of brought up something I want to mention. You see, ever since the Switch released and realized the success it's brought them, they started doing small practices that were kind of dumb, but people accepted over time. Some of these actions go as simple as re-releasing older titles for full price to barely putting much effort like 3D Mario All-Stars. And look, Nintendo is known to do both dumb and scummy things. I am aware of that. But if you take a look at their past generations like the GameCube and Wii U, they showed a lot of humbleness and took many risks that most likely would cost them millions. Funding Bayonetta 2, Amiibos, Miiverse, Splatoon, and all the other various experiments they've done with that console were really fascinating times to be a Nintendo fan. This doesn't mean that Nintendo plays it safe all the time, of course not. The Switch itself was essentially Nintendo's last chance in the home console market, and a lot of its exclusives are some of my favorite games of all time. My main concern here is that Nintendo could scare away enough people to not buy their products. That is highly, highly unlikely, especially now with the Switch, but you never know what can happen. In the meantime, I don't see myself getting the expansion pack anytime soon.
Oh shit, here we go again.
I'm sure most of our viewers have played a Grand Theft Auto game at least once, right? It's a really fun franchise and hard to hate if we're talking about the original releases of each entry. Honestly, I never really finished a GTA game, but normally if I play one, I tend to screw around driving and setting up mods in single player. I know I'm no true fan, but they really aren't my kind of games anyway. That doesn't mean this franchise isn't successful by any means. GTA 5 is not only the best-selling in the series, but one of the best-selling games of all time, sitting on 155 million units as of November of 2021. That isn't something just any publisher can say, and it says a lot how much quality and polish a Rockstar release can have. That doesn't justify this mess, though. Let me give you some context. Throughout the months in 2021, people have been noticing that Rockstar has done some cease and desists on some modders who helped improve a few of their Steam releases. They even went as far as to threaten some with lawsuits. With Rockstar doing this all of a sudden, it was pretty apparent that there was something in the works, which many were correct. Around October 8th, Rockstar officially announced that they were going to be porting the 3 PS2-era GTA games, those being 3, Vice City, and San Andreas. On top of that, they were also going to be fully remastered for current consoles like the Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and the Series X, all under the name Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Definitive Edition. Wow, that's a mouthful. This was a pretty big deal to a lot of people. Getting 3 legendary games of its era with better-looking graphics all in one package. Even I was all in on the idea considering I never actually played any of these titles. Sure, the original releases of GTA were fine, but most weren't functional without the use of mods like San Andreas Steam port. Many also weren't available for current consoles. While I feel like it would have been nicer and easier for them to just port the 3 titles in one package without any changes, I appreciate them going the extra mile. Not only that, this was also the first time we'd see a GTA on a Nintendo home console, so I thought that was great to hear. Soon after, on October 22nd, we got a new trailer giving us a better look on the visual enhancement compared to the original and a release date of November 11th, 2021. Before I mention what happened during launch, I have to say, the visuals look really good. According to Rockstar, the game was remastered in Unreal Engine 4 to be able to release it on as many platforms as they could. I know the character models aren't exactly good, but if we're talking like the lighting, landscapes, and vehicles, I really like them. It keeps the simple style of the originals while modernizing them to work with modern hardware. And for those of you wondering, I didn't end up getting the game even before its release. I just personally don't pre-order games unless it's... you can guess by now. Back to the main topic though. After a few weeks more of waiting, we did end up getting the Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Definitive Edition on November 11th, 2021. How did it do? Probably not the best reception in the world. Not only was this game insanely buggy with glitches like as you see here.
Okay, homie, let's load this shit up.
It also had a horrific frame rate on all platforms, including the PS5. Heck, you couldn't play the game for 2 whole days at release if you bought it on PC. Oh, and best of all, remember how I mentioned about the Steam releases of the original titles? You can already imagine after seeing this mess, people would most likely just get the cheaper and even better versions, right? Well, what if I told you Rockstar completely delisted those ones from Steam and your only option was the buggy and worse looking alternative? Because that's apparently what happened to force people to buy it. And yeah, that's the whole story of its release. Initially, I saw this as a cheap cash grab on nostalgic fans of the initial releases. However, as I was taking notes on this, there's a lot more to the story than I thought. Around 2013 or so, the 3 games in the trilogy were developed for mobile phones by Wardrums, which is now known as Grove Street Games. If you ever played on these ports, you already know that they're not that good depending on the title. That's because the code was almost identical to the one from the console versions and just made a few changes like UI and developer notes. And now you're probably wondering why I need to mention all this, and it's quite simple. Grove Street Games essentially did the exact same thing that they did to the mobile ports, but instead of doing it for those platforms, they did it for Unreal Engine 4, and the only major change was to spruce up the game's visuals. They didn't even do it entirely by themselves, but rather AI enhancements. I have no clue what the thinking process was here. How did they expect a code from a game engine that is over 20 years old that doesn't exist to work on modern hardware? I can tell that this was more so Rockstar just trying to rush this project out the door. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Remember how I said the GTA Remastered trilogy was removed on PC? The main reason that they did that was because they accidentally left a ton of files they shouldn't have in the first place. This goes as far as to songs they don't have the license to, and the hot coffee scene. I personally rather not mention what the latter was, but all you need to know is that this scene alone made San Andreas reach an adult-only rating from the ESRB and made Rockstar and Take-Two, their parent company, lose over $20 million. You cannot make this up. I could go on and on about what they did wrong here, but let me end it off to show the cause of this. Basically, they planned to re-release GTA 5 for the PS5 and Series X, but since they had to delay it, they decided to rush the remastered trilogy to cash in on the holidays and get a higher number in their physical year. This is the same company who was able to make another 20 million copies of GTA 5 sold in 2020. This goes to show that greediness for money can easily make a company do actions to this degree.
In 2077, they voted my city the worst place to live in America. Main issues: sky-high rate of violence, and more people living below the poverty line than anywhere else.
This game is one of the greatest examples I've seen of how success can damage a company. I originally didn't want to put it here since it didn't release in 2021, but since it's getting nominated for the Game Awards, I did my best to convince Minty to write it here. Now, up until the entire release of this, I had no clue who CD Projekt Red was actually. That was until I started hearing a lot more over the months all up until Cyberpunk's released and decided to go do some research myself. You see, most big AAA publishers like Activision and EA are known to do very anti-consumer decisions like unnecessary microtransactions, buggy releases to patch them up later, etc. But CD Projekt was initially not like those publishers even when they got major successes. They were originally a small team with dreams of being a large publisher, listened to genuine criticisms that could be improved within the Witcher series, offered their DLC for free at launch, and helped popularize gaming in Poland, a country where it used to be kind of unknown. Personally, I think they are overly praised not in their games but rather their actions and stance in the market. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to undermine their capabilities and/or what they've done, but it's sad to me that we don't see stuff like this often in the industry. Point is, CD Projekt were one of the most beloved publishers as of late due to their decisions being more beneficial for the customer. This in return created a very loyal fan base for them with time. Now, on to this mess. Cyberpunk 2077 was first announced in May of 2012, with trailers coming in around January of 2013. It was at E3 of 2019 where it was confirmed that Cyberpunk 2077 was finally releasing on April 16th, 2020. Then it was delayed to September 17th. Which soon changed to November 19th, and finally December 10th. Jeez, even Final Fantasy 15 got delayed like once or twice, and that took way longer in development. Nevertheless, Cyberpunk 2077 did actually end up releasing on said date, though it was far from what we expected. What was originally meant to be one of the studio's most ambitious projects yet became a game with not-so-stellar reviews, absolute garbage performance on the platforms, a bunch of lawsuits both from investors and the Polish government, and hundreds of thousands of people lost trust for CD Projekt. To say that this was a disaster of a release is a complete understatement. Up until this game's release, CD Projekt had been making really high-quality work with appreciation from their fans. But sadly, what instead happened was that they decided to overhype the game more than they could, despite what the people working on it said. I highly doubt this would be within the developers' decisions to launch a game in this state. From what I've been hearing and reading about, development on Cyberpunk didn't start until 2016, right after The Witcher 3's DLC was finished. There are also claims that it was heavily funded by investors, including the Polish government, during 2017 to hire more members and make new teams. The only condition was that it must be a 2020 release. It's safe to assume that the publishers demanded for the game to be like how they were advertising itself to be, meaning the developers barely had time to themselves, let alone to rest. Honestly, I'm surprised there's no law as of now regarding this issue. Not only did they have the audacity to force their employees to work overtime for so long, I don't think they make that much money. On top of all this, CD Projekt even forced most, if not the majority of critics who were checking out Cyberpunk to only use the footage they provided. And if anyone decided not to and use their own, they'll get their production taken down. All in an act to make people think that they were getting a finished game. I can go on and on about why this had to be in my examples. I could say the same for the other two featured here. But what I'm trying to get at here is not to sound like I want these companies to be harassed or threatened. That is not the point of this production. I'm criticizing these companies over the months because I want them to succeed and be beloved by their fans. CD Projekt, Rockstar, and Nintendo are all capable of doing masterpieces of games. They're capable of breaking boundaries and they succeed in their own unique way. But of course, with time, as success grows on them, so does greediness. Meaning they will do some of the scummiest actions they are capable of if it means making a few extra $1 million. And that's what worries me about the game industry sometimes. And no, as much as I am defending the consumer, they can also do stuff that can hurt a company too. Plus, a company's main objective is to make profits. For me, there should be an equal balance between how much the brand is profiting from said product or service with the overall morality of it. People might argue that morals don't matter in business, and yeah, most of the time they don't, but by thinking with a mindset that there's no consequence to lying or ripping off the people who will buy from you, you're essentially setting yourself up for results like the ones that I mentioned today. But that doesn't mean we should completely stop supporting the developers. Just look at the lineup we're getting in 2022. We're getting Breath of the Wild sequel, Horizon Forbidden West, Bayonetta 3, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and so many more big titles from each publisher. I'm really excited to see how it can turn out and don't want this to be a way to completely hate them when these projects are released. Point is, don't let these companies think that actions like this are acceptable. It must be said and known to them that the market has standards and they can't just make a quick cash grab all the time. Let's just hope 2022 will be as good of a year as it's making out to be. Anyway, I think that's our production for the day. Though I do have a special surprise to you all. It's been a while since we've made a new production and you might be wondering if we have anything ready. As a matter of fact, we do. Another return, a new upgrade for us. We decided to make a big return once again with some new changes now that we have a proper studio to work with. And now that we have good hardware to work with, we can finally try out some games that I've always wanted to review. Hope the changes that we make moving on get the positive reception that we wanted. This camera did cost us a fortune. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to be preparing our next production right after this. What's next anyway?
Good job, team!
This is Akari from Mint Studios.